This is Blackbird's podcast, episode 2.
Hello everyone. Today we are having a pleasure to get to know a very unique spiritual journey that I'm really honestly, I just can't say how much excited to have him here. And this is a man called Martin Faulks. He's the author of several best-selling books in the mind, body, spirit genre, as well as he's the general manager of Lewis Masonic. Am I pronouncing this correctly?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, the world's largest Masonic publisher, and Martin is also deeply involved in Freemasonry and has huge knowledge on Hermetics. Guys, this man is a magician and you should definitely check out his work. I will put all of the links in description below. You should entertain yourself with the skills and teachings he shares for free on YouTube channel. There is really so much high quality content. You can spend there quite some time checking one video after another. I mean, guys, this man studied with ninjas in Japan. Like, who does that, really? Well, Martin does. So I'm really, truly pumped, as you can see by this conversation. I'm not trying to hide it. So let's dive in. First of all, Martin, thank you so much for taking your time and joining me for today's podcast. I really love your surname, by the way. It feels like you're bringing the spiritual teachings amongst kind of the regular folks down to the earth for everyone to have a chance and go on evolving. And indeed, you are doing that amongst other things which are more complex and deep and profound. You are also sharing a lot of deep knowledge in a very simple, easy to understand style, which is amazing. And I think you can do this, in my observation, you can only do this because you are really sharing it digested from your personal experience. And your personal experience can definitely be felt in your teachings. They really share this kind of specific key that only a personal experience can create. So to start, Martin, please talk to me about your spiritual journey, the so many different ancient traditions you explored very much in depth. I know you take Hermetics as the basis for everything, but you also draw from different ancient traditions such as yogic. I heard you quoting Yoga Sutras also. You learned from Japanese wisdom, like you had your time with ninjas. So you also went deep with Tibetan fire meditation. You shared the presentation of it on your channel, which is also very impressive. Please go ahead. Welcome in the podcast.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. And it's very interesting that we should end up talking. Before I got your email, must have been 2 weeks beforehand, I was searching for something completely different and I ended up watching your channel. So it's out of all the videos on YouTube, it was amazing that we'd sort of connect like this.
Really interesting.
Yeah, so yeah, that isn't that amazing? I think another connection is you mentioned about Faulks.
Mm-hmm.
There's a debate where that surname comes from. Some people might think it might mean Faulks as in folks, as in people.
Mm-hmm.
Others think it might be from the falcon. And so this discussion could be the Blackbird meets the falcon. It could be. Yeah,
I like that.
So after your introduction, someone understandably watching this could think, wow, this guy's doing so many different things from different traditions. What's he trying to do? And it may look like it's lots of different things, but it's actually just one thing. So in my life, what my calling is the perfection of the mind, the evolution of consciousness. When I was young, I didn't quite have the words to explain that, but I always had a really keen interest in human potential. So if I heard of something someone could do which seemed special or supernatural, I'd be fascinated. So what my path has been is a journey whereby I'm always at the edge of my ability, And whenever I come up against the next step, the next challenge, if my progress slows down, or if I feel I could do with some tuition or inspiration, I will search out a master in that art, no matter where they are or what tradition that is. And I hope to have no barriers to learning in order to progress. So that's why you'll see me learn from lots of different places. Now, you mentioned about kind of the Hermetic, which is very much modernly seen as the Western tradition, and the yogic. And you can learn a lot by looking at both. The yogis, they're really good at detail and classification. They go in depth over specific states and steps in consciousness. What they're not so good about is explanation of the how. They don't explain the mechanisms or what's going on behind the scenes. A lot of it is very direct. This is like this is like that, and so on. Whereas the Western tradition is very philosophical, and it will tell you a lot more of how this is working, what's going on. So it's like nice to be able to see both sides of the coin and see the same thing being looked at from two very different vantage points.
Yeah. Please go on.
So one interesting thing is that actually there's been a conversation between these two traditions going on for most of human history. So we know that Greek philosophers, journeyed over to India to be able to learn from what they called the gymnam-sophists, the naked philosophers. And they were naked not just because they only wore a loincloth, but they're naked because their philosophy was simple, beautiful, and direct. At the same kind of time, and the Indians, they would travel over to Egypt to learn from that wisdom. And we've got records of them in that time around the 1st century AD. They were going there to learn medical things, and they were learning from the Egyptian tradition, but also there's a lot of exchange of ideas there as well. So the conversation's been going on for quite a while.
I have the last time when I was on the workshop that you were sharing about the Hermetics art of memory. Was it Hermetics art of memory? That, yeah. So since then, I have that thinking about these two traditions as because it's so beautiful the way you put it, how the yogic tradition is very kind of naked, like clean, precise, and it doesn't, the teachings, the sutras themselves are very short and concise, but then the explanations, they do go like a bit more in depth and stuff. But I have a feeling that the way that I am getting to know the Hermetics and what you are sharing is very much in working with the mind rather than transcending the mind. Is more, this is in my observation so far, it seems that it's very detailed in instructions of how to work the mind and really engage into this reality and work with it, play with it, kind of in the more fun and best possible way, kind of to get the most out of this reality.
Yes, one difference which is very exciting to see is the interpretation of what's going on in the same spiritual process is very different. So if you're a yoga practitioner or from a tradition very influenced by traditional yogic techniques, when you practice your samyama, your meditation, you are going to focus on that subject, and your consciousness becomes the same vibration. There's a transformation in you, and you would achieve a sense of oneness or samadhi on that.
Mm-hmm.
The best text for this to really understand it would probably be the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. They're absolutely wonderful. The same process in the Western tradition isn't about transforming what's in you. It's about connecting with something higher. So you will focus when you do your meditation. Remember, meditation is a Western word that we've kind of found is kind of the equivalent. You could achieve enlightenment. Enlightenment is when a light enters into you. So if you meditate on the sun, there's an external energy. The sun has got its own consciousness. You've got your own consciousness. They link together. Now, what's really exciting is if you compare the two. If I get you Neoplatonic works or Hermetic works, and I write what they think would happen if you meditate on the sun and achieve oneness, and I get you the yogic texts, very early yogic texts, the Vedas, that kind of thing, and we look and see what the yogis think will happen if you meditate on the sun. This oneness has the same effect, but one person thinks it's an inner transformation, and the other person thinks it's a blessing from outside. If we carry on with this analysis, we also see some very beautiful, interesting things as well. The Western tradition has an idea that after you have perfected yourself, so let's imagine we've gone through balancing and healing and regenerating ourselves with the elements within us of earth, water, air, and fire. We've learned to overcome any weaknesses we've had or injuries from the past or areas outside our control. We've purified ourselves. We are as solid and stable as earth. We're as emotionally balanced and intuitive as water. We're as intellectual and expansive as air. We're as fiery and ambitious as fire. Once you've sorted this, then you can step beyond yourself. You can come out of the body and you can journey to higher planes in your spirit. They believe you're walking up 7 levels of the planets. Meanwhile, in India, very same time, they believe the same process. Their elements are in a different order, slightly. They've got the air at the top.
Space.
But they believe the journey's inside through chakras, 7 levels of chakras. They believe the journey's in their own consciousness. So this interpretation, which is very interesting, the Hermeticist would see that you need to go beyond the vision of yourself. You've got to step beyond yourself and become more. Yoga is saying, let's get rid of the ego and become less. Both achieve oneness, one going out, one going inside.
Wow.
Beautiful comparison.
This is incredible. I really think that the time has come when the Western mind is going to start accepting more of the Western ancient teachings as well. We kind of really went straight for the Eastern ancient, like more mainstream spirituality. I mean, but I was reading Jung a little bit, just enough to understand that he was exploring alchemy a lot. And when I was reading about alchemy, about his scriptures on alchemy, I saw a lot of parallels as well. And I was thinking, wow, this is so beautiful to observe the European development of consciousness seeking for enlightenment and seeing how it's, of course, so different because the culture is so different. But I would really like you to talk a little bit more about Hermetics, because it's something that is not very well known for many people. I'm sure many people who are going to be watching this here are going to kind of get to know about this word maybe for the first time, or just hear it a little bit. So can you give a little bit of basic explanation of it
Yes,
and how they work with the elements as well?
certainly. So in the mid 1400s, Marsilio Ficino, the Italian scholar, he was translating the works of Plato for one of the Medici. He found amongst a collection a text, a very important text, which was said to be written by a man called Hermes Trismegistus, Hermes the thrice great. Now he knew this figure because the tradition of Hermetics had been protected by the Persian practitioners, and had kind of circulated. There was small text circulating. Hermes Trismegistus is a kind of combination of the ancient Greek god Thoth, who's a god of communication. He's a messenger god, and you probably know him by his winged sandals, and the god of magic from ancient Egypt, Thoth or Tehuti. So he'd found something called the Corpus Hermeticum. That's what we call it now. He called it Pymander, a text that promised to teach the original Egyptian traditions. It starts with a vision. It's Hermes' enlightenment. Once, when thinking about the things that are, this is a reference to the meditation that used to be done in the tradition at the time, was just, if you observe everything outside you and everything inside you as one. That was their kind of meditation at the time. Once, when thinking about the things that are, my body started to fall into a sleep. Not the kind of sleep that you would get from eating too much or working too hard. So he's going into meditation. That's the Egyptian way of saying it's a special sleep. But then my senses became dull. To the yogis watching, this is pratyahara. My body, as if at a great distance. And then my spirit rose up onto a great height. He becomes at one with the mind of all, and he discovers something very important. All things are made of pure consciousness. So when we imagine something, we kind of shape it in our mind. Well, Hermes discovered that there's a substance, a kind of mind stuff, a kind of original spark that is connected with us. The brain's just the receiver. Mm-hmm. Our consciousness is a kind of this mind energy. To think the brain's doing the thinking would be a little bit like if someone heard a radio and thought the noise was coming from in there. The presenter's actually in a sort of station transmitting. The same process we use to imagine things is how everything was created, how the original consciousness made everything. So what the Hermetic art teaches you to do is to train this consciousness so you can do special kind of things. You can start to create and change these subtle forces just in a more powerful way. And there's a belief that this is what we're here to do. So everyone watching this interview right now believes that when we're born, we have less awareness. And it grows. When we're babies, we start to examine the world. We start off with quite random movements. We start to calibrate our eyes. We learn about things. Our awareness grows and it grows and it grows. There's certain forms of play that appear first. First, we sort of play on our own, and then we play next to someone. Then we start playing with a cooperation. We move into more complex rehearsals of the future. The Hermeticists are saying that this process should keep on going till we have a God-like level of consciousness. But we get confused, and our society actually isn't ready for that. So Hermetic training is needed to keep us going. Now, can you imagine how excited the yogis must have been to hear this as a philosophy? This is really wonderful. So this text, where did it come from? We do have some sources which are contemporary that tell us that what was happening was Greek philosophers used to train in Egypt, and they respected the Egyptian priests and priestesses. So they asked them, said, right, we want to put your teachings into Greek from hieroglyphs. How are you doing that? Now, what's beautiful is if you've ever studied Egypt, they're so genuine and authentic. They just do. They don't muse over things like the Greeks do. They have the talent, they have the tradition, they're so in tune. So having a Greek ask you how makes you think about it. It's a bit like if you and I went to amazingly talented athletes and said, right, tell me how you're achieving this. It might take them a while to sort of consider this. So the Greeks wrote the Egyptian tradition in their philosophical language. And it's quite interesting. Modernly, I think we're moving that from philosophical to psychological often. So that's why we've got these very interesting texts. We know the Hermeticists accepted people of all different traditions, and that they had Christians amongst them, and Jewish people, and people who were Neoplatonic, and again the yogis, and maybe even Buddhists. There's some hints of Buddhists there. So it was kind of a mixed circle, and so this is all about the science of consciousness. And I think the yogis would have seen it as yoga. Probably they thought this is a form of Raja yoga that is being practiced.
Yeah, I really don't know yet. I cannot form an opinion so much. I'm so like eager to know more. So can you tell me about the 5 elements, right? So this form the basis for their work. Now, in yoga, if we compare it to yoga in yoga, it's also the basis, but it's more as the foundation. Is the foundation to prepare actually the body and the mind, and basically all of the energies creating a human being to be purified enough so the mind is not so much on the way anymore. Basically, Panchabhuta, which is the 5 elements method, means purification of the 5 elements. So purification of these energies, so they are not on your way. They are kind of in harmony and balance, and they are supporting the evolution of your consciousness and the separation of the consciousness from entanglement with the material world, right? This is kind of the short summary of the yogic philosophy of working with the 5 elements. But then in Tantra, they use it to really manipulate the reality. Of course, there are mixtures, yoga, Tantra, and some yogis also do some kind of magical stuff, but it's more a tantric thing, to manipulate the reality and to be a magician, basically. So tell me, in Hermeticism, how does that work?
Yes, so certainly most of the things you read in different yogic texts about the use of the elements exist in a reflection within Hermeticism. So, for example, in the Dattatreya Yoga Sutra, there's a technique of condensing those elements in you, holding them, and so you become at one with them through energetics. You can see in that Yoga Sutras of Patanjali a sort of oneness through pure meditation on the elements. What you get in yoga is far more detailed explanations of technique. It's like a formula. In traditional Hermeticism, it's more like someone pointing at it. And if you read what they kind of did at the time, it's very inspirational. So let's imagine this. If I say to you, the building blocks, remember I talked about this mind stuff, this energy, this underlying force. It, like the material, it's the same in nature in the sense that it is constructed of 4 different distinct elements, original vibrations. So the story is this, that first there was the original light. In the earliest Hermetic texts, this is like a goddess who, she just emanates. It's actually described as a smile. The whole of existence was made by a goddess smiled, and it just, so it's just like radiated out. In that smile, which is the first consciousness, there were some original thoughts. And these were those elements. Now, these are most certainly true. You can see it around you. There's solid, liquid, and gaseous, and energy states of everything.
These really are the fundamental qualities of reality, right?
Absolutely. And so your mind stuff, this energy of your mind, is made of this as well. And it serves certain different purposes in your consciousness. So there may be some things which you're better at elementally, or some things that you find harder, and it could be to do with your experience. So let's imagine what could mean that you can't use all elements as easily, and you need to go through that purification and that detachment that you were talking about. Let's imagine when you were young, you were in a situation where some very confused people interpreted your emotional expression negatively. Maybe they just couldn't handle your creativity, or maybe they weren't feeling very good. So when you were, they tried to make you feel bad. You can understand that this emotion, which would be the water element, you might close that down for defense. Maybe you're a 6-year-old child and you don't have time to come up with a complex coping strategy against the teachers or other older children. So you just cut off that part. It's like when your shoulder goes into a spasm to defend itself. This could happen in any element. So it could be, maybe you were too clever. Maybe you had a best friend who loved you and you loved them, but you were too clever and it embarrassed them and made them feel bad. Maybe you cut off some of your intellect. You've just thought, I'm not using that because it's painful. So that would be your air element. Maybe there's something in your fire. This could be something particularly in a very ambitious, passionate person. Maybe you won. Maybe you won at a competition at school, and when you saw the people that you had defeated so crushed, I don't want to do this to people anymore. So you close down that fiery part. Maybe in the earth, maybe this is a normal earth strategy. Any parent watching this has experienced this. You say, right, it's bedtime, and your young child goes, no. Maybe you were so punished for that no strategy that you let go of it. You think, I'm not ever going to hold my ground anymore. That really causes trouble. So there may be parts of you that are not functioning because you kind of had to emergency stop. There could be parts of you that never developed. You just didn't get a chance to learn to do that. So that's another reason that some of those elements might not be functioning. It could be that you've overused an element. Let's just imagine someone at school found that actually being really aggressive worked. It worked towards the other children. It actually kept teachers cautious because there was such a response. There's people like that now. They've probably got a job in sort of a high up job in business, And all they can do is be aggressive. That's how they solve everything. And it works in most parts of their life, but when some tenderness is needed, they'll just try, let's imagine this is a high up businessman and their daughters had a horrible circumstance. Maybe let's think of something that would really touch you. Maybe they've lost their baby or something. That businessman wants to be kind and comforting, but he has none of that skill set. So the closest he can do is say a little bit of aggression. Say, pull yourself together. Stop. You've just got to move on, because he hasn't got that gear. He's stuck in fire all the time. So it could be you've overused that kind of circumstance. You've overused that. There may be legitimate injuries. It may be that you've got trauma in a certain area of your personality. You may have seen something or experienced them. So the Hermetic, like the yogic path, was going to start by you dealing with this. So you're going to have to bring some of this stuff back online. This can be quite beautiful. So traditionally, a practitioner, let's say you and I are working together, we'd go somewhere or find some means to tune in. Maybe we'd be sitting in a valley where it's very earth, and we'd sort of tune into that. We'd start applying those earth strategies in life, being at one with that, and the special techniques to become at one with that underlying, your mind becomes along with that original idea of earth. You start to become empowered by that. There are methods to do that. You could probably see this in Tantra with chakras and their breathing techniques and so on.
Could you elaborate a little bit on these techniques or meditation on these techniques? Because this is, wow, I love it. Like every time you talk about something, it's something I've heard, but then you give it this incredible twist and perspective, and you just put so many puzzles together. And right now, you were talking about these disowned qualities of ourselves, which is so similar to a shadow work from Jung. I don't know if you know if you've read about it, but it's kind of a thing actually now in spiritual circles and everything, personal development circles, about shadow work, right? And I never really related to it, the elements, but it's purely relatable now when I listen to you explaining this. This is incredible. Yeah, wow, what a good explanation. So yeah, tell us about.
So let's talk a bit about alchemy. Let's talk about those techniques and where to find them.
Just a moment. I have like a really strange request. I put before, because I thought we're gonna have it at 7:30. I put bread in the oven. So
okay, then we'll talk about bread as well when you get back.
Give me a moment.
So for everyone watching, while the Blackbird flies to get her bread, the baking of bread in medieval Europe was seen as a comparison to meditation. So you'd get those ingredients, you put them together, and the whole yeast, the whole rising of an idea was like that. So imagine a form of meditation where you're not trying to become, keep equal or keep focused. You're leading in a journey where you're going to get more and more excited to a sort of moment of extatio, of a real breakthrough, or you're going to depress yourself. That may sound very strange, but even the yogis used to use this. That's what they used to use the corpse pose for. You're going to get yourself into a state of oneness.
I love how you keep on going.
Hey, I've taken over the show while you're away. I was just explaining about the analogy of bread and Christian meditation.
Okay, wow.
But you'll have to watch. You'll have to watch back later on to find out.
This is incredible. I love it.
So let's go back to the elements
yes.
and how to use them.
Mm-hmm.
So first and foremost, I'd like to supply something which is a very interesting insight as to why the elements are in a different order in yoga than they are in Hermeticism or in most forms of Hermeticism. This is actually really interesting. So in nature, everything outside us, the elements are earth, solid, it's the most heavy. Water, liquid, it's the next most dense and heavy. Air, which is gas, which is next most dense and heavy. And then find the least dense, which would be a fire or energy. This is the order in most Hermetic texts. But you do find somewhere they switch the top two. So why is that? Why do we have air? Why do we have the fire underneath the air? That's quite a strange situation. They switch it when they're not talking about the outside world, when they're talking about life. So life is an ongoing process where the energy is deliberately diffusing, as it were. Your fire is slowly going back to the top. That's your life. So the yogis, I suspect, this is just, from me reading these texts and contemplation, as you say, everything I present is really thought through. I muse on things a lot more than most people before talking about them or doing them. This is why they've got the difference. Now, you're not the only yogi to be inspired by alchemy. So just to tell everyone here who might think of alchemy as sort of people doing chemicals and things like that to try to make gold, it is that, but it's more than that. So do you remember I said the Hermeticists have an idea that we should naturally develop to divine levels of consciousness? In alchemy, there was a belief that everything was developing to its ultimate potential. This alchemy is a tradition from ancient Egypt, and it got to India as well. And we've got a lot of Indian alchemical texts. One of the ones is my favorite is a complaint letter where what a yogi has sold some mercury as a rejuvenation liquid to someone in, I think it's Mongolia, and they've written back saying that doesn't work, I want a replacement. But the yogis saw their path as being alchemical. What's the path? You're going to turn everything to its best. So you are the alchemists. You're going to turn everything to a blessing, no matter what happens. And indeed, hard things that most people would see as horrible, that's what you like best. Just like roses grow in an animal waste, just like the lotus flower in Egypt loved the swamp water and would make it pure. You are there to transform everything. Your excellence is through harmony. Your power is kindness and good intentions. Everything is transformed. So this is where the kind of alchemical angle comes from. And Jung was studying that, but the yogis also studied that. And I think they related. They thought, yeah, this is it for us. I think there's even one text, a yogic text. I think it's the Total Freedom Tantra has a section where Hermes Trismegistus appears. So the yogis in the medieval times did actually they saw it as an aspect of Shiva. Amazing links. But let's go back to the elements. Why did I explain all that? I've come to believe that our greatest potential, the most wonderful gifts we have, are not in our greatest talents, but in our worst vices. I think that sometimes our potential is so powerful an area that we can't control it, so it comes out a bit funny. So have you ever seen someone who wants to be listened to so much that they talk louder than everyone else and over people? That person genuinely wants to be heard, but their unskillful method of doing it is causing the opposite. I've met really exciting, positive, sparky people who are wanting to be famous. And they're kind of doing everything possible to achieve fame. What they don't know is underneath that, under this layers of confusion and temptation and distraction, what they're really after is being genuinely respected. It's got a bit warped. It's grown incorrectly. I can't tell you how many times I've heard someone who is really an impressive person boasting so terribly that people don't believe them. And if they just said nothing, or if they just told the truth gently, everyone would think, wow. They've stopped people thinking, wow. So this process, this alchemical process, you've got to grow up your faults into the beautiful blooms they were meant to be. Look at why do I keep doing this? Why is that never working? What am I really after? And this is quite a tricky process in the modern world. You and I, everyone watching this, has a lot of things to distract us, and they're skillfully distracting us. You want to lose weight? Well, you have got thousands of years of human evolution of making food as tempting as possible. You've got commercialization, where people have been practicing selling you food, not on its value for health, but on how much they can tempt you with that food. So this kind of, they're the things that play to your worst parts, really. If you're a man watching this, you probably had some very confused, mixed feelings over things, because the media has been telling you should be a good, loyal, faithful husband or boyfriend, and it's telling you that a powerful, successful man should have lots of women, and that's your status would be affected by that. If you're a woman watching this, you've probably got a lot of mixed sort of messages in your culture as well, telling you you should be an amazingly successful person in your business, and empowered, and moving to new heights of achievement. And at the same time, if you're going to be a mum, or you're going to live in the world, you're going to have to be always perfectly groomed and beautiful and attractive, and have huge amounts of time for your children, and be making apple pie with them every day and take them out to play. And all these goals can't go together. Why are they there? Because they tend to play on our weaknesses. They control us, and it's evolved. There's money behind it. They're making you buy something to make you feel better. So we've got some good training in the world. We've got a lot of alchemical things to transform in our elemental balancing. Now, you asked about the techniques. It's good.
Ask a question before we go on the techniques.
Oh, certainly, yes.
Regarding the alchemy, right? Because you were mentioning now all these weaknesses, actually, which are meant to be transformed through the alchemy, right? And now, when you were doing this workshop the last time I was participating as an audience, you were showing this the circle of memory, which had upper part and then second part. And then you said when you join, right? So there were letters around for everyone who don't know about it. I will actually post an image so you can see it on the screen. So you can see the upper part has certain letters, and then the lower part has certain letters. And when you turn the circle around, you mix different letters from the lower and upper, and you get the third thing, right? And at this point, when you were explaining this, I connected this also with the alchemy, not just with the memory, but also with the alchemy. So if I have one thing which is my weakness, what can I add to this thing to create a third outcome which is going to come out as a new thing, which is going to be wise and which is going to transform the original thing. It's a way to alchemize, right?
Yes, I think so. So the technique you're talking about is a Renaissance memory technique. And memory in those days meant anything you can create in your mind. It could be recalling something, but it's kind of more like we'd call visualization now, imagining things. But I like the vision that you described there. And I would invite anyone watching this to contemplate what their vision, their genuine vision of the goal is. So let's imagine all these different traditions, you know, whether it's Christianity or Hindu yoga or Hermeticism or Kabbalah or whatever words. Let's just say there's this life. And yes, cultures have got different ideas of special training, but what are we really trying to do?
Mm.
If we're going to achieve a sense of oneness, and we've got this kind of idea of enlightenment, and the East and West have got slightly different ideas of that. We could talk about that in a second. It's this oneness must involve being in the world. We can't cut off completely, or we're cutting off can't achieve oneness. Do you see what I mean? You can't say, no, I don't want anything to do with that, because if that is part of the whole. So let's imagine yoga as a union with everything in life. You're at one with the flow of life. You're at one with the wind, the seasons, the people that you meet, the cycle of life that you're going through. You've got this oneness and you're harmonizing and going beyond yourself. We could kind of imagine that as the vision. And I think the approach you're talking about would lead to that. And you would be like the alchemists. During the time where alchemy really flourished in Egypt, the actual masters, what they call adepts, that would be like a siddhi in yoga, were normally female. It's interesting how it's gone full circle, isn't it? Nowadays, you'd kind of associate that kind of studying chemistry and that kind of thing. And perhaps in the Western tradition, we don't have many very well-known women adepts. And there were some of them who were said to be so in tune, so powerful, and so aware, they could walk into a room and there'd be 5 or 6 different sets of conversations going, hear them all, and answer everything. So they'd say an answer that responded to all the conversations perfectly. Amazing kind of thing. So this vision of enlightenment at the time, they'd call eudaimonia. Eudaimonia is human flourishing. So that would be a state where you've got the right mind, you've got the right body, you've got the right job, the right surroundings, you're in the right place for you, you've got the right friends and allies, and all of it makes each other better. The right mind leads to the right posture, that leads to the right attitude and response from others. The right food leads to the right balance in the body, the right energy levels. The right job leads to the right abundance coming back. So this vision, as you say, was very outward shining like a bright light. Now, that's not to say that periods away aren't really powerful and important. If you want to repair an engine, it's good to stop it, you know, trying to do things where it's happening. So periods away and silence and being away from the world, and especially when you prepare yourself to begin with, you need to protect yourself against some of these things. Your ability to transform isn't going to be perfect to begin with. So you need to be compassionate and keep away from people who would disempower you and confuse you and misdirect you, or from environments which are hurtful for you, or actually just where people shouldn't be. Yeah, that's not to say that there aren't strategies in your training that would involve keeping away or silence and time alone.
Can we talk a little bit about this part of the journey? Just to not go too much of, you wanted before to continue with the 5 elements, right?
Yes. So in traditional times, there were always a test of genuineness before someone was to disclose these techniques. I myself have had to spend a lot of time to try to get teachers of both sort of in the Western traditions and in the Eastern to sort of open up. And so I think here we probably shouldn't go into the actual exercises, but I can give a signpost. If you're really interested in the mechanics of Hermetic training, there's an author called Franz Barden, and he wrote a wonderful set of books, but Initiation into Hermetics. This is the Patanjali's Sutras of Hermeticism. This is the ideal work for you to explore the how. You could also have a look at my website, which you kindly said you'd link to in the description below, and you can see some of my books. If when you're listening to this, you think this is where I'm going, this is the what I'm seeking, then you can have a look at some of the writings to hear more on all of this. Now, where we were about to move on to something else, onto a different subject.
So actually now
about
you mentioned few things.
Sorry?
You mentioned few things. We were talking about the elements, and I don't know if you wanted to elaborate this further, but if you do, go ahead. Otherwise, I have a few questions for you here.
Yeah, so I think the one thing that's worth discussing here is about the training you could receive and how to sort of look for that and the nature of it. So for me, I'm always looking for someone who's further down the path that I'm walking. It's very good to practice with people who are better than you at what you're aiming to do. You can read a lot, you can think about it a lot, but if you're next to someone who's really perfected it, or with people who have really perfected this, it's like your higher self or your subconscious, however you'd like to view it, are learning. This is even with physical skills, you know, there's small things that you observe and you don't know you observe. Your energy also imitates in this way.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing we need to be aware of is to be cautious about what kind of training we undertake, because spiritual teachers have an ongoing challenge, and it's not a new one. What is popular compared to what is effective and authentic? So let's imagine this first purification stage we're talking about. If we imagine someone who had the real medicine or the real alchemical secrets, a set of different potions that would heal you and upgrade you and change you in this direction, but they're bitter tasting, they're expensive, they're slow, but they really do what's meant to be done. You can think about this in any respect in life. If you want to, I think we used weight loss earlier on. The truth of weight loss is you do need to exercise, you need to say no to certain foods, you need to discipline yourself, you probably need to have to put up with some hunger and deal with some change. That kind of, the medicine, the doctor is there. On the other side, if you've got someone selling sweets, it says, don't worry, everything's sweet, everything's beautiful, everything's instant. This person who's saying you can solve your problems with quick answers and something that's got no hardships involved, they probably will get the crowd. So if you're a spiritual teacher, yes, there is a lot of reward in the genuine path, but it's not the same kind of reward that would attract a large number of people, and it's quite hard to make a living doing that. So it's tempting to start sweetening and moving over to this side. And this is particularly happening now in the modern world, but I want everyone watching us to know it's not new. When the Greeks, remember we mentioned, they loved the Egyptians, they kept calling them magos. They kept calling the Egyptians magician. And they said, no, we're not magicians, we're priests. It took 100 years of calling them magos for them to say, okay, yep, we're magicians. They gave in. The same is happening and with yoga. When we met yoga again, after the sort of hippie movement and everything, we had a very strong thing about opening our hearts and expressing that. If you read the traditional yogic texts, they're about harmonization, but it's about mastery of your emotions. You're going to meditate on an austere person. Their vision of enlightenment is someone beyond emotions. Emotions will not control them. You do everything precisely as described by the guru. There's no innovation. There's no freedom in that sense. You follow the instructions precisely. You're going to master yourself. You will be a vision of total control. We weren't after that. We were after release. So we went over to India, still are, and guess what evolves? The texts that most reflected what we wanted became more popular. The teachers that said, yeah, okay, free love and open your heart and do that. The teachers who there were aspects of that in, yes. So popular yoga doesn't often completely overlap with authentic yoga because of seeking popularity. And it's a hard challenge for any teacher. It actually is, not to be corrupted, but also to make a teaching approachable as well. I mean, yes, we can be compassionate for some interpretation. I don't think many people are going to do Vedic style sort of discipline training in the modern world in their yoga center. Yes. So yes, I think that's an important thing to note before we go on is look for what works. Look at the teacher. By the fruits you will know the root of the tree. Look at their students. Are they changing? Is it working? What can they do? Don't worry about any claims of authority by big titles or by tradition. Look at them. Are they a template of excellence? You can hear in their words. Words are a reflection of their thoughts. Are they eloquent? Are they honest? Are they distinct? Are their actions organized? Have they got the right morals that reflect what you're doing? Have they got integrity? I've heard people say that person's a terrible person, but a wonderful yoga teacher. I thought, wow, that's very different than anything I can see. To me, those are the same. They're very, very close together, those two concepts. Those two can't coexist. Anyway, so that's my thoughts on that purification process and how to seek out an authentic path of that. So let's move on to your questions now.
That was really important words, very, very important words. Really nice. Thank you so much for sharing this. And all the rest basically that you already shared. So what I wanted to ask you about Franz Bardon that you mentioned, because I know that you are actually having a school of meditation which is based on the teachings on Franz Bardon, and I was checking reading what you're writing about it, and I thought it was very interesting, as well as your knowledge of meditation is something that I haven't seen in any other YouTube meditation teacher or anything that you can find online. It's so, as exactly as you were saying right now, it's not trying to be interesting. It's really talking about meditation as it is. It's a very simple thing in a way, as you say it. You said that it is right, a natural process, and
Yes.
that's amazing.
Okay, so let's talk about that. This is very exciting subject to start off on. So you'll meet people who they've got great love of art. Let's imagine that a painter, they know everything about the feel and of different paints. They know about oil paints and watercolors and the pigments, and they love that, and they spend all their time painting. And that's their calling in life. Maybe you know someone who they're studying something. Maybe they love the stars. They've got the right sort of telescope with great optics and everything like that. Well, it's all about consciousness. So that's my paint and my telescope. And I'm very excited by that. And that's where my effort goes in. So as I sit before you, I've been practicing since my early teens, 2 hours a day. Only one day have I ever missed a session. My father had a heart attack, so I couldn't do my evening session. And that's both discipline and passion. So my wonderful fiance, she's a historian, and sometimes she goes away for a weekend to teach or to perform. What I do, of course, I think, wow, that's two days. Well, I'll just perfect my latest, whatever the next step I'm working on, I'll perfect it. So I genuinely enjoy the path. And so I've done a lot towards this path myself, but I've also had a lot of help. People have invited me into their homes. I've stayed for weeks, and people sort of in Japan, in the mountains, they've got often people got a little house outside the back of the house. They've really taken me through their ancestral knowledge. In the Czech Republic, I met great masters who really took time to answer all my questions. We're talking on Zoom here. I can remember there's certain times in my life where there's been a teacher I really wanted to learn from, and I haven't spoken their language, and they don't live anywhere. They just wander through the countryside or the mountains. But I know certain shrines they go to now and again. So I've convinced the person that looks after that shrine that when they come there to turn on their phone, go and talk to this wandering ascetic and ask questions of them and translate. And I've got a relationship, we've actually met for every sort of month for years. People have given a lot to help me. As I got into my late 20s, I started to realize something was wrong. I'd always turned down students. I didn't want to make the effort. I wanted to just focus on what I was doing. And I felt that in a sense I was being pure to the path, but I started to realize that if the sort of the flow of this wisdom, this universal wisdom beyond all traditions, I was becoming a blockage. and I was being selfish. So I started to take students, and you learn a lot from teaching. Fates means that the students you will find will be the ones that test your weaknesses. It's interesting. And you learn a lot about letting go. So you're talking about a lot of yoga is letting go. I learned very early on that you need to let go of any wish to remain an authority or have status. That may sound very strange, but I've found that if you have anything like that, you're trying to keep yourself above someone. So there's some subconscious part of you that isn't sharing or helping enough that they might overtake you.
Oh.
So you need to go into a situation as a teacher with a heartfelt, genuine desire that this person will surpass you, and be excited about the idea. And there are people with such great talent that I think they will, because they have me, and I didn't have me in the same sense. So they've got that. So it's working. It's very exciting for me. Now, we also talked about, you mentioned about it being a natural path. Imagine this. I know that you're staying in a beautiful woodland. Imagine if we were training there. Maybe we had some other friends there. Maybe people watching this video could imagine themselves. You're in this beautiful countryside. It's lovely and warm. You've got spring nearby. I think that if someone was to focus on their meditation and try to tune in to different things, maybe easy things to begin with, maybe meditating on that sort of a stone, and then trying to find out, can we feel the difference? If you get a precious stone, this stone's meant to be sacred and this one isn't. We wrap them up. Can we feel the difference? Can we do that? Can we meditate? If we learn, if I want to learn to improve my concentration, can I learn from the falcon on the wind? Can I watch? He's got very good focus. If I tune into that, if you and I started to step behind the light shining from the sun, if we started to be able to feel the force before the wind started to blow, you could imagine how powerful this would be. Now, modern practitioners wouldn't do that kind of training very often. It involves a lot of failure. You and I would, maybe to begin with, we couldn't sense the difference between the stones. Maybe watching that falcon day and day and learning its lessons might be a bit of a tough thing. You know, it's all very good sort of to begin with, but week 6 of learning from the cat or the falcon or the fish or whatever might be tough. Maybe some of those far out experiences might take a big dedication, so we could do this for weeks and so on, until we finally had that experience of being able to see behind or step beyond ourselves. So I think it's all very natural. But what Franz Baden does, which is superb, is you've got someone who is an expert in controlling, seeing, being at one with these underlying energies. So that's what he's interested in. And he spent his life just looking for what works. He studied very much the Western tradition, but he also studied, he saw Shivananda as a great teacher as well. He went to see Alexander David Neil from the Tibetan tradition. He studied the runes. He was really interested in how, and he really wanted to make it work, and did. So he's got a systematic form of training, and it's universal. It's called Initiation to Hermetics, but if we called it, a complete system of yoga, and you'd believe it. It could be Tibetan, it could be Indian, it could be Western, because it's so universal. You might have the odd hint in there of some of his influences, but from everywhere. So this is a wonderful training manual. Now, what does a training manual do? It also stops us choosing to avoid the things that are hard. So for balance, we should all be practicing the hardest things, not the easiest things. If you're very fiery, you should probably be learning a bit more water. But the things you'll choose if you're left alone will be fiery. Now in India, you'd have a guru who'd see that, and he'd direct you, make you test yourself in different ways. If you don't want a guru, then Initiation to Hermetics is the manual for you, because if you follow it by the letter, you have to go through all the things that teach you to be balanced. If you're inflexible, you'll become flexible. If you're too solid, then you'll change that. If you're too flexible, you'll learn to have integrity. If you lack ambition, you'll light that fire. If you don't see yourself in a certain way, maybe you think, I'm never a person that can learn. I could never learn a foreign language. I can never do maths. You'll start to open your mind so that you can do all things. This is the way.
Wow.
So leave a comment in this description if you liked the idea of the mountain retreat when we're there.
Yeah.
Forest retreat.
Thank you.
That's the kind of training you're interested in.
Yeah, I'm actually thinking about it,
Well, I think this is more or less what you're doing there, is it not correct?
Yeah, but I was thinking about how to make use of this place and everything that is kind of cooking in the background. And this is like a beautiful plant of the seed that you're just placing right now.
So it's not just bread that's cooking in the background, there's some things in here as well.
Exactly, yeah. Other things, not the bread. The bread is in the oven. I mean, already out now. Looks amazing, by the way. Thank you for asking. So, you know what I wanted to ask now. So, the school of how is it called?
Yes, it's called Seshen, which is
Seshen.
the Egyptian word for the lotus.
Uh-huh.
And I deliberately chose this because the lotus flower is sacred in almost every tradition. And what's special about the lotus is that negativity, dirt doesn't stick to it. So it's the Teflon flower. You can throw mud on it and it just goes off. You can put glue on it and it falls off. It's made so it's coated in a beautifully pure way, but it also purifies. So the lotus, you put it in a pond and that pond will become pure, and it makes a beautiful scent. So it makes something that had a stench have a perfume. So this in Hermeticism and in yoga and in almost every other tradition is a view of our state whereby we're transforming and improving.
Yeah,
which
and the pure consciousness is seen as never getting stained, right? It's always just reflecting the reality. It's like it's which is projected on it, but it's always remains unstained. It never gets
yes, indeed. And that's an important thing. We're not doing this for us. So if we look around in the world today, you can see it's a bit confused, isn't it? That may be an understatement. We're ripping the whole planet up to make things, to sell them to each other. There's ongoing fighting and terrible pollution, and it's not really very coordinated. And so if you can imagine the consciousness of the earth, each one of us is like a brain cell. It's time for a bit of a wake up. So where do we start? We start here. And those ripples are actually very, very powerful. You can really underestimate the power of example and the power of group consciousness. People watching this may have even heard of there's a sort of famous event where monkeys were studied and on different islands, and as soon as one on one island discovered something, all the others did. It was like they somehow knew. You may have experienced this kind of thing yourself, where you sense something, or where something you do sort of brings something else into effect, the ripple effect. Well, there's actually some interesting studies in America that show this is more powerful than you'd imagine. If someone makes a change in a family, even without communicating it, if the people around them all tend to reflect that change. So the lotus flower is a goal for our own inner tranquility, but we're looking after us. We're sweeping before our own door first. We're making sure that we are the expression of what we want to see more in the world, in here and outside. We do things we want to see more of in the world. We say things we need to hear more in the world. We are the change that it's being called for.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Which actually leads me to something interesting. So maybe one difference, and it could be because a lot of the yoga practices we have are from ascetics, where the goal is to try to escape. You're going to get away from the world and break this cycle. Transcend. But there is a sort of the world is negative, and you're going to stop that death and rebirth process. It's illusionary, perhaps we should say. In Hermeticism, you do get some schools that are quite like that. But there's a school which is a little bit stronger from the past, where it explains the human state as follows. Do you remember I talked about that original light?
Yeah,
first light.
The smile.
Yes, this sort of shining. So this original light shines, and there's a reflection of this, which we could kind of see the soul of the world. We can kind of see this sort of energy, the first reflection. But through this light, it looks at the material world. And nature looks back at this original light, and they fall in love. And nature wraps herself around this spark of pure goodness, this spark of pure light. Imagine the qualities of beauty, of truth, of good intentions all together. That's what this light is made of. And it wraps itself around in a form that can come to earth. That spark is you. You might think you're your body, but this is your clothing. It's very nice, and it's a lovely reflection. It's beautiful and should be respected. You might think your personality. That's wonderful. That's like the light that's shining out. Maybe that's your smile, is your personality. But you are that spark of pure light, which is made of kindness and of beauty and of truth. So you've got to use what you've got best, but you're sent here to help. You are the caretaker here. You've been sent down. Some of the early Hermetic texts hint at this, but later on you see it elaborate, and it's quite beautiful. It's almost as if there's going to be a forgetfulness for those who come here, and the world could corrupt you. But you've got to hold in your heart that you are that spark of light, and not get too pulled into the material and into competing with other confused people. And it's quite hard, isn't it? Because you've got to defend yourself, and it's kind of set up. So, I mean, it's quite weird, isn't it? There's enough food, there's enough space, but yet we're working ourselves so hard that we die early. Someone's got confused somewhere, haven't they? But remember, you're the spark of light. You've come here to help. And the aim is to create a kind of what we'd see as heaven here. Your enlightenment is to save the world and to save others. And that's a sort of, I think that's a beautiful vision to connect with.
It is. It is indeed. It is indeed. Regarding the creation of, wow, it explains it so differently, the Hermeticism, than the Vedic traditions. Actually, it's very different. It's more. Let's say it's more romantic. I find it more romantic.
Yes, very poetic. What's
Mm.
interesting, though, is the meeting often has a joy to it. So, for example, we know a Neoplatonic, or there's a story of a Neoplatonic practitioner called Apollonius of Tyana. Apollonius was a great miracle worker. A lot of the stories we hear about Jesus were once said about Apollonius. When he met the Brahmin, it was almost like a, wow, hello, friend. And they said to him, oh, you worship Mnemosyne, the goddess of memory. So do we. Because, of course, Brahmin have got great memory traditions. They have a whole Veda they memorize for sort of practices and things. And the story says that the Brahmin, the yogi, said, we're going to give you a gift. It's going to be 7 rings, which, because you worship the goddess of memory like we do. Now, this is all code. By worship, they probably mean that he's got memory practices. That's how you worship memory, is by being good at memory. People have always thought these were real rings. They thought they're probably of the planets, and they'd wear one each day and it would have magical powers. I think they taught him the chakras, because each chakra is a memory palace. So when they heard he had a memory practice, they thought, we've got 7 memory palaces for you. And I think it's sort of Chinese whispers, it's been going on for so long that we kind of forgot what was being taught. So which way around did these techniques go? It's hard to know, but it's beautiful to think about. What we need to focus on, of course, is what's effective and what works and brings out good results in the world where we are now.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Exactly. It's just that we want that, of course, for so long, and that's kind of the main reason that we reach for modern shortcuts and sugary added stuff, because we want things fast, and we want them from the wrong place, maybe also from the place where we want to satisfy a need that is not really a need, like you were saying before in this, if somebody wants to be heard, then he's going to speak very loud, or wants to be respected, is going to want to be famous. So I think it's so important to first clarify, or really set the ground of purifying the vision that we have, kind of purifying the intellect, so we become better in discernment and clarity.
Yes. So, and sometimes, you're talking about these false desires. Some people, there's a signal problem. Let's imagine if your petrol tank kept saying it was full when it was empty.
Yeah.
So there's a signal problem. Yes. Or sometimes the other way around, keeps saying empty when it's full. Actually, probably more people like that. People where there's never enough affection, there's never enough money, there's never enough time. They always think the petrol tank's empty, no matter how much petrol you put in there. Sometimes there's a genuine alarm bell going off. So there's a warning, the fire alarm is going, because there is something that needs to be solved in that person's life. It's very tempting for someone in that circumstance to go to someone who's offering a solution that changes the message. They say, right, good news. They offer, I'm going to put a sticker over your petrol gauge that says full. I'm going to pull the battery out of your alarm. There's no fire. So it's very easy to go for something that changes the feeling or changes that, rather than fixes the problem. And it can be confusing for everyone involved with these kind of shortcuts when you don't know, if you don't understand what's happening. So that's an important thing. So in our observations, we also want to make sure that people are genuinely solving things and it's demonstrable over some time. That the person doesn't just sort of have a big, I feel so much better after I did that or after this happened, and then you see it just goes back to normal. It's a sort of a moment, or they're not doing things to cover stuff up. You know, if we've got a sore back, we want that back fixed. We don't just want painkillers. So we have to look for the source.
What would you say? What would you say is the way to build this kind of personal maturity that allows you to always, in yoga they call it ignorance, right? Is the main cause, the main kind of source of all the rest of the issues that we encounter. And I really think that's like, really, I can see it in myself that definitely ignorance is really behind all of the rest of the bullshit. So, but I think it's kind of maturity, the personal, there's like a certain level of maturity that has to be reached in order for someone to develop enough of the level, enough of the intellect, and also detachment from it, so you can gain this insight, right? The wisdom that allows you to see your own ignorance and allows you to recognize your own motivations behind the actions you take, such as like the example of before, wanting to be famous or wanting to be respected. What would you say is the path to get there, to that kind of?
Yeah, so first of all, the ignorance, it's exactly the same in Hermeticism. Ignorance, this is what the source of, and sometimes deliberate ignorance. So there may be things that we've got sort of shortcut mechanisms, or we come up with beliefs that are convenient and that kind of thing as well, this kind of thing. So ridding ourselves of ignorance. There are many different ways to start moving beyond this ignorance, and then it should be tailored for an individual. But the most powerful that I can recommend out of all of them is the key, which is that good intentions. So if you start to look at what you're doing and you start to try to make sure that everything you say, everything you do, every action that you're undertaking is thoughtfully, skillfully, and heartfeltly directed to bring the best outcomes for everything. This is an amazing purification tool. And it's funny things happen. This key allows you to start to see how many things you're doing without thought, without any direction, how many things you're doing which have got some funny mixed motives. Maybe you're not looking for the best outcomes. How many things you're doing thoughtlessly. And it can be really interesting. If you start to take that, once you've done that for a while, start to add in that key of truth. Make sure that you're only ever speaking the truth. And that is a wake-up call. Because you start to realize how many things you sort of approximate, or how many things you say for effect. Maybe you exaggerate a little bit or you change it a little bit. Wow, it starts to show some of the funny aspects and games that's going on, you know. Maybe also making excuses to defend yourself. You've got a preemptive excuse where you're saying, I didn't do this because of something else, and it wasn't because of that thing. Then finally, you could add to this, if it's all flowing and working very well, to bring a sense of beauty. and joy into everything. Now, the reason I feel inspired to share this as an answer to your question is because notice these are the three qualities that make up that original light. So really, all I'm saying here is you're going to let that light actually shine authentically out. Now, this may sound like a very new age concept, but it's actually a very old age concept. It's very ancient wisdom. And this may sound like a very gentle and beautiful practice that is about you being a kind and thoughtful and honest individual. But this is actually amazingly powerful, majestic, and influential. When you are moved by good intentions only, you harmonize with the energies and the forces around you. So then everything starts to become your ally. Things that look like luck are in fact guided. You're working with how things really work rather than against them. When others struggle trying to paddle against the river, you are the river. So you achieve far more than anyone else with a lot less effort. When you speak only the truth, people know it. It's a very strange thing. The subconsciously, they know it. So when you speak, they listen. And soon it's not just people. You say something and it's like the whole world responds to match your intentions. And when you start to work in beauty, it's like you are the living talisman for your mission, for your outcomes, for what you're doing. Everywhere you go, attracting allies who are powerful and genuine, and circumstances which are auspicious and bring the abundance you seek. So this is a very powerful 3-level practice to take, and cuts through that ignorance and confusion and helps start moving to that next step.
That's really, really nice. And I resonate a lot with it, but I have a certain kind of how to say interpretation, which is something that I've been exploring for a while lately, and it's about the shadow that I was mentioning before, because I realized that I personally, in my journey, I'm going to share a little bit of my story so you can tell me your thinking on that, because you talk a lot about the light and the to connect with this pure essence from which our soul is made, which is the pure goodness and light, and then our mind, right? Our mind, we can see across the world, our mind is doing really horrible stuff. Human mind can be really horrible, right? So we have to cross this thick dimension of our mind to reach to the pure goodness of our consciousness and align with it and allow it to shine through us. So this method that you're sharing right now is really beautiful, and when you were talking, I could really feel the power of it. And it really put me in that vibration and that mood. But when you were also talking before, if you are too much fire and you try to work with water, when you're gonna be by yourself and in a certain situation, you're gonna become again the fire, right? So it's like that. You're trying to align with this pure essence of the light shining through you, but then you find yourself in a certain situation that triggers certain patterns of your mind that are not this anymore, right? So I've been reading and working on my own shadow aspects, as it is referred to in the according to Jung, which is basically our mind, right? The things that we suppressed because we tried to be good and accepted and loved. But then when we suppress these things to be good, accepted, and loved, these things never go away. They work in the background, and in certain situations they overtake us. And Now, how do you see that? How do you see this process of transforming, or let's say, purifying this thick layer of mind that can really kind of blur your vision and your perception and awareness of this pure light?
Yeah, so I think first of all, in there we could talk a little bit about point good, accepted, and loved. When we're talking, this is why I try to use good intentions, because the best outcomes can sometimes involve being quite fierce or assertive. The best outcomes can sometimes you need to be to make sure that justice is applied or that balance is maintained. So we need to be careful that people don't think goodness means what people like or just what we like. Goodness is about genuinely the best harmonious outcomes for all. Maybe there could be circumstances where a hard lesson needs to be learned, or time apart could be needed, or even just a cut off. Accepted could be a bad thing. You know, there could be a group of people who could lead you down some very funny places, or liked can be interesting if you want to be liked and you sort of can be led around the place. So I think it's important just to get that definition right, clear. So with the shadows, I think, as I've mentioned before, this kind of ties in. We've kind of we've gone full circle. And I'm just looking at the time, thinking, wow, we've had a few hours here. How wonderful time has passed. And
We're fast, yeah.
yeah, it'd be wonderful to do this. If people love this video, we could do this again, and maybe we'll reverse this. I will learn from the wisdom of Blackbird and ask your opinions. But I think these things that are in the shadow look like they're sort of inner demons. But what looks like a demon is sort of a baby angel. It needs to be taken out and grown up. And the reason they pop out in those circumstances is actually peculiar enough through their good intentions. They're trying to defend you or cope with that situation, so on. Maybe, you know, we can make up, or maybe there's a part of you that learned to give a preemptive attack when you were at school. And, you know, 30 years later, you still give a preemptive attack to your boyfriend when he's trying to say something. Maybe there's a part, that kind of thing. So often these are beautifully powerful parts of yourself. And that preemptive attack kind of thing, maybe you want to keep that skill for when it's genuine. You think, actually, this is going in this direction. So you want to be able to, a bit like a cobra, you could say, actually, this could be trouble for you if you're going to give me, trouble. There's some lovely bees in Japan that they turn their bellies and show they've got red bellies in a formation that says, "Now this is actually our honey." And you say, yes, it is your honey. So you might want to keep that, but you just need to make sure it comes out at the right time. And maybe develop a more gentle one as well, where you could say, what do you mean by that? And you could just show something. So these shadows need to be watered and fed and developed to what are they trying to do? What am I trying to do by that? And what I've found is it's really important to put an authentic expression of what you're trying to do. Don't just stop. So if you're addicted to cigarettes, and if you look at that and think, why? You think, well, actually, it calms me. You really meditate on that and think, that's not calm. It just cuts my emotions off. Okay, right. Why would you want your emotions? What if you don't have it? What emotions are they? Okay, so that emotion keeps coming up. Now we can start looking at what's an authentic way to deal with that. If you don't put the authentic way in place, it's really tough to go without. If maybe, let's imagine you're really miserly. I'm very naturally ascetic by nature, you know, and it can border on miserly sometimes.
What's miserly?
Miserly would be you won't spend money even when it's legitimate. So I tend to, I've got sort of 2 or 3 sets of clothes and only 2 pairs of shoes. You know, that's sort of what I'm like. I tend to have very few objects and don't want to spend money on things. If I'd probably buy a pack of nuts for lunch than go to a restaurant. So yeah, so that's my nature. So if you're back, you might want to look at what am I trying to achieve. So that kind of thing, you could, and then you need to replace that before you stop. You can do your generosity in a different, and you can start to find what you're trying to achieve and bring that out. So I think we've gone on for about 2.5 hours now.
I could be going on still.
How beautiful,
nice.
And we could probably do another 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
But I think we both better go. You've got bread that's needed, and I've got some duties to attend to. But as I said, if people watch this and think, "Wow, this dynamic's good. I'd like to hear more," they can leave a comment, and maybe we can book another one.
Yes, please go ahead with your feedbacks, how you enjoy this. And I would just like to also invite you again to check out Martin's work, check out his books, check out his YouTube channel. Definitely, his website is also super interesting. He has a lot of written content as well to read there. So go ahead and click, and you can see that this guy is like an endless pit of knowledge and also delivered in such an authentic way. This was amazing, Martin. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been an honor.
Your perspective on shadow was also this last part. So nice, so beautiful to listen to you elaborating this. So, and an honor is all mine. Thank you so much, really, for replying my email and coming over here. And yeah, let's wrap it up. That's it. Let's see when we repeat the session and talk about more of the beautiful, beautiful wisdom of life.
Thank you.
Namaste, everyone.